Hey folks, doing this full moon in Cancer video. You see we have this full moon in Cancer. This is happening February 13th, early in the morning. The moon is opposite the sun. The sun is here in Capricorn. The moon is in Cancer. And this is a time where the balance between the practical efforts of the sun in Capricorn are harmonized with the feeling sensitivity of the moon in Cancer. Now, the moon is the ruler of Cancer, so this archetypal feminine devotional energy is being activated now. And the moon is in the Nakshatra of Aslesha, which is a serpent energy, where there's a sort of coiling and an embracing, where we're wrapped up in something, either devotional or emotional, or driven by desire. And so that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. We're going to unpack that. In addition, there's the exchange between Jupiter and Venus, which is quite prominent now as well. And you can see these highlights that I have here with Aslesha transforming poison, emotion, and devotion beyond desires. These are some key themes. Saturn, moon, feeling, like integrating this feeling of the moon in Cancer with the sort of practical, even somewhat fearful and sort of rigid nature of Capricorn, where we're wanting to feel safe and protected, and again where we can tend to even cut ourselves off from feelings and emotions because they're dangerous to some extent, right? We can get hurt emotionally, and we've all been hurt over our lifetimes emotionally. So Saturn is where we're trying to be protected. Saturn is the ruler of the sun, and then again, as I say, the serpent energy. So I do want to also just let people know that if you want to know how this will play out for your sign, you can click that link, that join link, and you can get the full moon in Cancer video for your sign, which I'll be doing in the next day or so. And you can also get these member forecasts here. You can see there are forecasts every week, especially at the Oracle level, where you also get these free classes that are coming up. Well, they're not free; they're part of the, they're part of the membership. But it's only $29.99 a month for all the forecasts. But even just getting this full moon in Cancer for your sign is only part of the examiner level, which is only $9.99, and you get a bunch of other forecasts. So do keep that in mind. The reason it's important is because, again, this sun here in Capricorn, we're finishing the Capricorn cycle. The sun is about to move into Aquarius, and it happens, this full moon happens right on what's called the Gandanta point, also the very end of Cancer. You see it's 2942. So it's not just that the sun and moon are in Cancer and Capricorn, but they're at the end of their signs, right? So again, these signs fall somewhere relative to your sign. For example, your rising sign. If you're Virgo, then this sun, as it's been going through Capricorn, has been your 5th house, and this full moon is happening in your 11th house. So again, there's this harmonic tension that is always happening, right? So again, if you do want to get any of the forecasts and at the membership levels, you can just go there, and this level here, $9.99, gets you those forecasts, but then a lot of people get the full forecast as well. So, as we said, this structuring and this harmonic balancing is really what the full moons are about, and it's easy to just talk about the full moon like it's the beginning of a cycle. You hear this a lot. It's not the beginning of a cycle, it's the middle of a cycle. The cycle began on the new moon. And so this moon is going to go around and then it's going to join the sun again. But by the time the moon joins the sun the next time, the new moon will be in Aquarius. By the way, just so you see, the last new moon we had was here in Capricorn. And you see this new moon in Capricorn for all 12 signs. This was at the examiner level. So again, just showing you that these new moons and full moons are happening all the time. And keeping up with these cycles are very important. So this full moon is the halfway point of the Capricorn cycle, right? So that cycle of having good boundaries and feeling safe and protected and feeling practical and in fact not emotional, making decisions based on rational assessments. We need to do that. Notice your bias, if you have one, when I said, emotional or rational and practical, we tend to judge one as good. Oh, the emotional one. Okay, that's the good one. Rational, practical. Oh, that's kind of cold. Well, if you're looking to get ahead in your work, in your career, in fact, even in most anything, you have to be pretty rational and practical if you're going to succeed. Because if you're just emotional all the time, then you're being driven by your emotions, which are your feelings in the moment. I feel this way right now. Okay, it doesn't mean we act upon that. And when we're too emotional, particularly about our long-term plans and certain things, it can just be sort of like a roller coaster, right? There's a lot of emotions. They're not just the good ones, so to speak. So this halfway point in the Capricorn cycle, though, is to make us sensitive. Because in excess, the Capricorn energy is too rational and practical, and we're disconnected from our feelings. This is the sort of archetype of the person who just relentlessly pursues their ambitions and success, and they're disconnected from the heart. And they don't even realize it. They just kind of put it aside because they need to get more and more and more. And it can be driven by a kind of fear and this kind of mindless accumulation, right? So, as always, there's that harmonizing point in the middle where it's not one extreme or the other. They balance each other out, but they feel kind of like extremes. Full moons feel like extremes because we have the sun in one side and then the moon opposite. So there can be a lot of emotions coming up. But again, we also need to understand that the emotions are just, it's how our heart, which is not just emotions, feels on the surface. The emotions are just the surface of the heart, or how the ego experiences the heart. Because we live our life mostly through our ego, through the surface of life, just like the surface of the waves on the water. The water isn't just the waves, that's just the surface. It's the depth, just like in life. Life isn't just the surface, and if it is, we're just going to be blah in all things. Ideas on the surface is Mercury, emotions on the surface is the moon, and even things like what I was talking about, the excess of Capricorn, just all the practical details on the surface is Saturn and Capricorn energy. So instead of just being triggered emotionally, which can happen when the moon is in Cancer, because we can have that attachment. And by the way, we're meant to have attachments. Most of our attachments are emotional ones. And that's not a bad thing. If it's just in the emotions, then again, this is why it's problematic, because if we're so attached to fleeting emotions, then we get lost and get confused. When we're attached to devotion, then it's good, because that's what we're supposed to be attached. Like a mother's love is devotion, and she's trying to. That's a healthy attachment, because there's purity of love there. The purity of the heart is in the depth, but the depth isn't emotion. The depth is devotion, right? Just like we're also devoted to our pets, right? We have a lot of love and devotion to innocent animals and creatures, right? Sometimes they're children, but again, our children also grow up and then they become adults and we have a complicated relationship with them. But when they're little babies, it's very uncomplicated. It's kind of like we are with animals. With a cat or dog or an innocent animal evokes our purity of heart, our devotion. We want to feed it, nurture it, take care of it, and it doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't have to even give us any love, but we still love it. So that is a quality of devotion. And notice how much beauty comes in that aspect of life. And compare that to the emotions that are connected to our desires. And I want this thing, and I'm so emotionally attached to getting this thing. Revolves a lot around people. My happiness is invested in this person and this situation, and when I get it, I have a happy emotion. When I don't, I have a sad emotion. And they were mean to me, so now I'm angry. That's also an emotion. So again, there can be a lot of emotions that are generated by the ego on the surface, which is driven by the desires. Now again, this is important around this time because this nakshatra of Aslesha, again, it's kind of, there are a few symbols. One is a serpent, and the word Aslesha, it means entwining or wrapped around, like embracing, entwining, entangling. Like a serpent is coiled, like a snake is coiled up. It's also a symbol of the Kundalini, and even like a caduceus. If you've ever seen the caduceus, it's like these coiled serpents. So serpents are symbols of healing and transformation. Their poison is also a great elixir if we know how to, navigate the intensity. And the same is true with this nakshatra of Aslesha. When we're wrapped up and tangled up in devotional things, like a mother's love is like wrapped around the child. The embrace, that emotional embrace, is not just emotion, it's devotion. And that kind of embrace will take us straight to the source of the heart and life itself. Because everything in life runs through the heart. Even intellectual people like me, or people who might seem like they're disconnected from the heart, they're really not. They're always connected to it. Maybe they're distant from it, but when we do meditation and whatnot, we're trying to awaken that deeper connection to the heart. This is why devotion is so important. Like you've probably heard me many times talk about my devotion to my guru Amma, right? It's very pure. I don't want anything from her. I don't, it's not like I'm trying to get something, right? There's nothing wrong with relationships where I am trying to get something. Again, we learn about desire in different ways. They're actually related to Venus, which I'll talk about in a minute. But this Aslesha Nakshatra is where we're wrapped up and tangled up in some kind of feeling experience. When it's on the surface and it's a lot of desires, then Aslesha Nakshatra is one of the more turbulent ones because, like I said, we're trying to connect to the source through the depth, and we're trying to connect to the depth through something on the surface. And it doesn't work. We need to connect to the depth through the depth. And the way to do it is to go deeper into the heart. That's why it's very powerful for things like meditation, stilling the restless surface mind, right? So that's the nature of Aslesha Nakshatra. Now when it gets to this point where it's right in between Cancer and Leo, it's called Gandanta. You should know that actually Gandanta it means loosening the knot, right? Because the zodiac signs are tied together by nakshatras, right? In Vedic astrology, the nakshatras are the foundation of the zodiac. The zodiac is actually not signs, it's first nakshatras. It starts with Ashwini Nakshatra, and then Aries sign begins at the same point. So Aries and Ashwini begin the zodiac. By the way, it's in every text the world over, no confusion, no controversy. It's simply there. Aries, Ashwini, and then between Aries and Taurus, you have Kritika Nakshatra between Taurus and Gemini. You have Mrigashira Nakshatra between Gemini and Cancer. You have Punarvasu Nakshatra. And then the knot loosens. Gandanta means that the knot loosens between Cancer and Leo. It also loosens between Scorpio and Sagittarius and Pisces and Aries. But this Gandanta means that the energy gets unsettled, unstable here, because it's like a hard stop and then a whole new beginning. So the energy like stops at the end of Aslesha. There is no knot holding it together. Again, just like the energy gets pulled through the zodiac by these nakshatras that bridge these zodiac signs, but there is none bridging Cancer and Leo. So the Aslesha Mula Gandanta, the point where the knot loosens, has an unstable, unsettling feeling. So there is that unsettling, unstable feeling that will be happening early morning of the 13th. And, this is a cycle. This full moon has a more sustaining effect. So we may really feel this kind of unsettled emotional state here. Certainly as we get closer, and on Tuesday and Wednesday, the 11th and 12th, those are the days. And sorry, yes, this is early the morning on the 12th. I think I said the 13th, excuse me. So on the 11th and the 12th, we're moving toward that kind of feeling that the knot is getting loosened. It kind of feels like that in the world, right? So again, the other thing just to talk about here is this Venus Rahu is still close in Pisces. So Venus, we're trying to connect with this sort of transcendent beauty, and it's exchanging with Venus in Taurus. So this Jupiter-Venus exchange is also very prominent right now, as these two teachers are teaching us very different lessons. I've done quite a few updates on those things as well, but it's essentially the exalted Venus trying to really connect us with that sort of mystical beauty, elevating desire beyond just possessiveness and emotional clinging and grasping. And again, that's one of the ways that it's connecting here, is you want to know. And so with this exalted Venus, it's actually giving us quite a bit of potential to really elevate our desire beyond the possessiveness and personalization, which is what can happen with Venus. Of course, it's also joined Rahu, which amplifies a bit of the attachment. But the exchange with Jupiter is also kind of bringing a higher vibration because the Venus is exalted. But if you don't do spiritual practices and things like that, if you're not doing much meditation and whatnot, then again, there can be a lot of desires being really amplified right now also. So you want to be aware of that. But the potential for deeper surrender, letting go, and connecting on a deeper devotional level is very possible now. So again, the Saturn-Moon opposition, bringing together this practicality of Capricorn with the devotional potential of Cancer is very important. Again, the Sun is also changing signs that day. So again, both the Sun and the Moon are even changing that day. A lot of energy and flux on this full moon as things move from the Cancer signs into, from the Saturn-ruled signs into, Cancer and Leo. The serpent energy has that healing quality, as the poison can become a great elixir. Once we feel the poison toxic nature of our desires and toxic emotions, they can be a great catalyst for that, like serpent rising up, like a serpent coils itself, but then it also rises up, right? So elevating our intelligence and consciousness, especially elevating our desires into something more devotional, especially to Guru's teachings and higher wisdom. And I'm just going to say this, it's not just children or pets or other things, but ultimately, until you have a guru of some sort, and it doesn't have to be the spiritual guru, but frankly, that's the best. This is the reason why it's said to be the greatest blessing ever, to actually meet the guru in the body. And I mean a living Satguru, like an Amma or a Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, Gurudev, or where that's actually your guru, where your heart is devoted, where there's pure devotion to God. That's the purest of the pure. It undoes all of the negative programming. It doesn't mean the programming isn't there, but it means you have a source to sink more deeply into now. Once you find that, it's something that everyone should be looking for. And again, this isn't religion. It's not religion like worshiping an external figure, but even then, people who have pure devotion to their spiritual teachings, particularly when there are practices involved and it's not just blind faith or whatnot, but when there's true alignment with Guru's teachings, and particularly when they revolve around practices, because practices are going to connect you with the spirit. It's not just going to be a bunch of worship and confusing worship and disappointment and projection. And by the way, the Venus-Jupiter exchange right now and for the next several months is also really facilitating that. And for anyone who's ever met their Satguru in this lifetime or through other lifetimes, it's the greatest blessing you'll ever have. And yeah, more than your kids, more than your husband, or whatever it is. Again, all of that's fine, but you are a spirit being who has lived many lifetimes, and when you find that teaching and the connection with that devotional, revered figure, then you love your meditation. Then you're not trying to I know, I'm trying to meditate, but I know I should. No, you love it. You can't do it enough. And when you do it, you feel you feel like what I'm describing. You feel devotion. And what happens is then, because you are coming from that deep state, you recognize the difference between that deep state of purity and the aggravated restlessness that comes because you lose yourself in some desire. You have something to compare it to, just like anything else that's very refined in your life. So it's something we all should aspire to. As much as I like to stay away from judgments and we should do that, it's the greatest blessing you'll ever have. That's why it's said in all the texts, right? So again, now is a very ripe and potent time for you not just to do it because you should, but to actually be receptive now to seeing and understanding what I'm saying to be true. I say this stuff all the time, but again, maybe now because of this Venus-Jupiter exchange, you'll hear it a lot more and you'll be more in alignment with the vibe. And it's not just now. The moon's going to come around. There's going to be another new moon. Then the moon's going to go over Venus, go over Jupiter. That's why this Venus-Jupiter exchange for several months, this is the promise. It gets magnified and heightened at certain times, like now, like a full moon in Cancer. But there'll be other full moons. There'll be eclipses. There'll be the moon going over these places. All within that context. So keep these things in mind. Right now, very powerful for these spiritual breakthroughs. And again, I really encourage people to stay connected through this member site. I do a monthly satsang. I do 2 forecasts a week. I have upcoming classes on relationship principles and the Navamsha. This is for the Oracle 5D members. 2 or 3 forecasts a week. I'm going to be doing the member forecast because, again, wherever this full moon happens for you is going to be important. If you're like me, I'm Gemini, so it's my 2nd house, opposite the 8th house sun cycle. If you're Aries, this full moon is happening in your 4th house, opposite the sun, which was going through the 10th. This contextualizes all of these things, and people who start getting these forecasts, they they get sort of hooked on it. They get sort of addicted to it because it's really powerful medicine. So we'll leave it there, and I hope this was helpful for you. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel.